Hi, my name is Kristin Rizzo. My family and I have been coming to Faith Community since the summer of 2018. My husband is TJ, and we share 3 kids between the two of us, Tristan, Luke, and Cece. Tristan is my son, and Luke and Cece are TJ's kids. I also serve on the worship team playing keys on Sundays. In my early years, I was raised in the northwest part of the country in what I would describe your stereotypical middle-class neighborhood. I remember spending my days playing kickball in the streets with other neighborhood kids, running through sprinklers, and riding our bikes to the local park and community pools. When I was 10 years old, my parents moved our family from Eastern Oregon to Las Cruces, New Mexico, which is a small agricultural community about 30 miles north of Mexico. To say the Southwest was a bit of a shock at first is an understatement. The first place we moved into was this old 2-story farmhouse my parents rented. Instead of a yard with grass, trees, and flowers, it had rocks, cacti, and tumbleweeds. I asked my mom what she remembered about that house, and she talked about how uneven the foundation was. The floor literally dipped in certain places of the house for no reason at all. My mom said she was scared her piano was going to fall through the floor. Around our house were these 3, maybe 4-unit, 1-room, single-story apartment-like buildings. Every apartment was pretty much the same, with very basic amenities for cooking and bathing. They were also very old and poorly maintained. After moving in, I was eager to play with the neighborhood kids like I had done in Oregon. But the kids that lived in this new neighborhood were rarely around to play during the days. I noticed that on some days they would go to school, but on others they would go to work with their parents, and on weekends they were never around. It wasn't until later I realized why this was. The families that lived in those little apartments were migrant families from Mexico. Oftentimes, the families depended on the older kids to work alongside their parents in the fields to support their families. Within a few months, my parents bought a house on the other side of town that was more like the neighborhood I grew up in Oregon. While we didn't live in that farmhouse long, it definitely left a lasting impression on me. We hear a lot about the border crisis on the national news these days, but it really isn't anything new. Historically, undocumented immigrants have been crossing the border from Mexico into the United States for over 100 years. For the most part, the responsibility to care for these people has fallen on the small, poor border communities which are already strapped for resources. Because of that, I grew up, amongst others, with the mindset that we needed stronger borders to keep more people out of the United States. But a few years ago, I happened to turn on the evening news and catch an interview of a woman who, after her husband had been killed by local gangs in Venezuela, and recognizing that her and her son really had no future in that country, decided to sell everything she owned and make the journey from Latin America to the Mexican border in hopes to cross into the United States. Hearing her story got me thinking, if I was in her position, I would do the exact same thing. I really feel that after hearing that woman's story and reflecting on the time I lived next to the migrant families in Las Cruces, New Mexico, that I began to have a heart to help resettle displaced people here in the United States. And I've thought about it for a very long time, but I just had no idea how to get involved. One Sunday, Pastor Mike closed his message talking about the influx of refugees from Haiti and how the Framingham campus had been approached by local municipalities to help. It was at that moment that I really felt God pressing me to get involved somehow. In the weeks that followed, I talked with both Pastor Mike and Pastor Dorian about my interest in migrant ministries, and after bouncing around several different ideas, we ended up on me exploring WARM. WARM is the Welcoming Alliance for Refugee Ministry. WARM partners with local resettlement agencies that help refugees in the Worcester and Western Massachusetts area. Its mission is to develop and mentor an alliance of churches who engage with refugees. There are many ways to help refugees through WARM. So far, I've had the opportunity to help set up apartments and houses for new refugee families and also teach English classes. What I found most rewarding so far is helping teach women from Afghanistan how to speak English. I'm so impressed by these ladies. They're really putting themselves out there. Most of them don't know how to read or write in their native language, yet they're showing up to learn English, not just to speak it, but to also read it and to write it. I feel very strongly that this type of outreach is something God has been calling on me to do for a very long time. I've just not had the courage to do anything about it until now. Despite all of our country's faults and shortcomings, I feel really blessed that I was able to grow up and also raise my family here in America, and I'm really excited to help other families do the same.